Ecclesiastes chapter 9, beginning in verse 1. Ecclesiastes 9, beginning in verse 1. For I consider all this in my heart, so that I could declare it all, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. People know neither love nor hatred by anything they see before them. All things come alike to all. One event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good, the clean, and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As is the good, so is the sinner. He who takes an oath, as he who fears an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that one thing happens to all. Truly the hearts of the sons of men are full of evil. Madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. Hold on to that. Psalm 22 now. Psalm 22, verse 14. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It has melted within me. In part of the Ecclesiastes experiment, Solomon surveys what life has to offer. As he goes through all of the complexities and the possibilities, he kind of gets to this point in Ecclesiastes 9 where he realizes it just seems to happen to everybody. Life happens to everybody. Life sometimes is difficult. Life sometimes, just stinks. There are elements of the human experience that are almost unbearable. There are times and seasons and events in our life where we are in the scene of David in Psalm 22:14, in a moment where our hearts are like wax. They have melted. We have no strength within us anymore. We are perhaps overwhelmed or discouraged or simply frustrated. Dealing with the heartaches and the heartbreaks of life. I don't know what yours may be, but I know that you probably have asked some of the same questions that most people have asked. What do I do? Dealing with unfaithfulness in the home, dealing with a lack of belief in the home, someone you love dearly who will not serve the King, dealing with the temporal things, job shifts and changes, and maybe overwhelming expectations, money issues, even things like house repairs. A place that should be an abode of rest and relaxation can be times where it's overwhelming. This breaks, and this breaks, and this breaks. How am I going to even be able to pay for it all? And that doesn't even take into consideration yet the issues we sometimes face with health. Our health, or the health of a loved one we have, mental health, physical health, spiritual health. Folks, life sometimes just stinks. What I love about this concept is God knows that life sometimes is unbearable. In fact, I don't know if you've ever really stopped and thought about this, but why do we have the book of the Psalms? That's a big old chunk of Scripture, guys. Why do we have the Psalms that go through all of these ranges of emotion? Because God knows that life sometimes stinks. Life sometimes is difficult and challenging. And we have a big old book in the Old Testament of people who had faith, who wrestled with those same things. Folks, it is mind-blowing to me that in a book about faith, a book that centers on faith, we have a huge section of it where people are wrestling with faith. You are not alone in your struggles. What do we do? I want to make this very clear at the outset. It is impressive that we serve a God who knows His creation like our God does. And then just as powerful, it is impressive we serve a God who cares about His creation like our God does. You want what we're going to talk about in a nutshell? Right there it is. What do we do when our hearts melt? The Psalms can help us here. So I want to work out of Psalm 22, but we're going to be all over the book of Psalms tonight. And I want to make 4 observations that I think will help us with this premise. Let's start here. Number 1, be honest with God. Go in the beginning part of this particular psalm, Psalm 22, verse 1. Psalm 22, verse 1. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me and from the words of my groaning? O my God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not hear, and in the night season, and am not silent. Now, what David expresses here is expressed by David in numerous other places. I just want you to see it here in this particular psalm. David says he feels forsaken. David is saying there, especially verse 2, I cry in the daytime, but you do not hear, in the night season, and I'm not silent. Have you ever felt that? That I pray and I pray and I pray and I pray, but God, where are you at? God, why aren't you listening? God, why aren't you sweeping in to help? You felt that? It's okay. It's okay to feel that way. I don't know why that makes us uncomfortable. Maybe it's because of some of the things we talked about Sunday morning. We're focused on such a deep appreciation for God, and we want to have the reverence for God that we should. And because we have that so deeply rooted in our thinking, we're afraid that any type of expression to God of pain or discomfort is somehow a disrespect to God. Folks, that's not the case. It's not the case at all. Be honest with God. You can express it to Him. Tell Him exactly what's going on. There are 150 Psalms. Did you know that 65 of them, over 1/3, are categorized as Psalms of lament? We don't use that word a lot, but the idea is complaint. Over 1/3 of the Psalms are complaints to God. And generally, these are structured in this typical format. They address God, then they complain to God, then they request something from God, they express confidence in God, and at the end, they praise God. 65 of 150 are written this way. Folks, it is okay to talk to God about these things. To open up your heart and tell Him, I'm struggling right now. This is really tough right now. This is frustrating. This is discouraging. And God, here's what's going on. We don't have to hide that from Him. He's big. He can take it. We can tell Him exactly how we feel. But let me stress why this is important. Not only is this an expression of faith, not only is He big enough to handle it, because He's God, He already knows. Can we see that a little bit? Let's go to Psalm 139. Psalm 139. Psalm 139. And listen closely to this. Psalm 139, verse 1. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there's not a word on my tongue. But behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. One of the reasons it's important to unload these things that are heavy on our hearts right now is because God already knows it. He already knows how you feel. Just open up. Be honest. You don't have to hide something from Him. He knows. Do you ever feel alone? I don't know how often you think about this, but I will tell you. Your kids think about this. If you have teenagers in the home, they're thinking about this. It can be a lonely enterprise to try to be holy. Now think about that for just a second. How many people do you know that you deal with day in and day out who truly try not to cuss? Now, maybe in the workplace, maybe in your own home, maybe at school, maybe a coworker or a friend. How many people do you know are really careful about what words escape their lips? How many people do you really know who are mindful about how they dress and they check themselves in the mirror to make sure they are modest before they leave the house? How many people really do that? Yeah, you start surveying the landscape a little bit and all of a sudden you feel pretty lonely looking around. But you're not alone. You can talk to God about these things. We can open up to Him and tell Him exactly how we feel. You might hold 139. We'll come back to it in just a little bit. But go back to Psalm 10. Psalm 10. I think it's important that we see this. What happens in some of these Psalms is not an anomaly. Psalm 10, verse 1. Why, Psalm 10, verse 1, why do you stand afar off, O Lord? Why do you hide in times of trouble? Just flip over to Psalm 13. Psalm 13, verse 1. Help, Lord, for the godly man ceases. That's chapter 12, but we'll just tuck that one into it. Fit pretty well. Help, O Lord, for the godly man ceases. Now we'll do 13, verse 1. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? Back up to number 6 now, Psalm 6. Psalm 6. Verse 2, have mercy on me, O Lord, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are troubled. My soul also is greatly troubled. But you, O Lord, how long? Return, O Lord, deliver me. O save me for your mercy's sake. For in death there is no remembrance of you. In the grave who will give you thanks? I am weary with my groaning. All night I make my bed swim. I drench my couch with my tears. My eye wastes away because of grief. It grows old because of all my enemies. Don't you see it, folks? Even in this psalm, David is lamenting his circumstances. So overwhelmed that he says, I have drenched my couch with my tears. We have a phrase for that. I cried myself to sleep. Now, guys, this is David now. A man after God's own heart, David, the courageous, faithful one who fought Goliath as a teenager. But listen to the words of his pain. I feel alone. It's okay. It's okay to take those complaints to God. It's okay to open up. You don't have to shield Him. I don't know why we struggle with that as we do so often. Here's perhaps something we could take from the Psalms. Be honest with God. But let's take that to its next level. Because sometimes individuals will take this concept, well, we need to be our authentic self. And what they mean by that is we need to let our emotions run wild and do whatever we want to do and justify it however we want to do it because it really doesn't matter. That's how I feel. So let me rein it in now before you get ahead of me. Number 2, from the Psalms, we learn how to handle our emotions. In fact, David here in Psalm 22 again, I want you to see this. I think this is an important transition. So verse 2, oh my God, Psalm 22 verse 2, oh my God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not hear, and in the night season, and I'm not silent, but you are holy. enthroned in the praises of Israel. Our fathers trusted in you. They trusted and you delivered them. They cried to you and were delivered. They trusted in you and were not ashamed. Look at what happens. This is a very powerful segment here. He laments being overwhelmed. He opens up and talks about his tears. But then look at what leaves his mouth in verse 3. But you are holy. David has the ability to express himself, to open up and reveal those raw emotions, and at the same time stay deeply rooted in who God is. You are holy. I'm overwhelmed, but you are holy. Folks, when we are in these moments where the hearts are melting, it is crucial we go back to God. It's crucial that those things don't push us away from Him. What they do instead is drive us to Him. But far too often, the emotions cloud and we pursue what we want to pursue. Go to Psalm 56, please. Psalm 56. Psalm 56. It's a marvelous psalm for this discussion. Psalm 56, beginning in verse 1. And you might have a little heading here. This is set to the silent dove in distant lands, a Michtam of David when the Philistines captured him in Gath. Let me brush up on your Israelite history for just a second. This is around 1 Samuel 21. David has just defeated Goliath in 1 Samuel 17. He is on a cloud. And as he works through some of this, that's when Saul starts having issues with him. And so 1 Samuel 21 is at the very beginning of David's running from Saul. But this is a low point. Saul was like a father to David. And now he's running from him because he's trying to kill him. So this is the context of Psalm 56. So verse 1, Be merciful to me, O God, for man would swallow me up. Fighting all day, he oppresses me. My enemies would hound me all day, for there are many who fight against me, O Most High. Whenever I am afraid, I will trust in you. In God, I will praise His word. In God, I have put my trust. I will not fear. What can flesh do to me? All day they twist my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They gather together. They hide. They mark my steps when they lie in wait for my life. Shall they escape by iniquity? In anger cast down the peoples, O God. You number my wanderings. Put my tears into your bottle. Are they not in your book? When I cry out to you, then my enemies will turn back. This I know because God is for me. In God I will praise His word. In the Lord I will praise His word. In God I have put my trust. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? Vows made to you are binding upon me, O God. I will render praises to you, for you have delivered my soul from death. Have you not kept back my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of the living? Don't you see what David is expressing in that psalm? I'm overwhelmed, but I trust you. I'm overwhelmed, but I trust you. He keeps going back to that central point. That's what he does in Psalm 22. When lonely, turn to Him. I told you to hold on to Psalm 139. Let's go back there. Psalm 139. The 139th Psalm. We read verses 1 through 4. Look at verse 7. Verse 7, Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, Surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. Don't you see what David took refuge in? Was an ever-present God. And all of the emotions of the event, all of the suffering of the moment could not cloud his vision on this point. He might feel alone, but he wasn't alone. He might feel abandoned by all, but he wasn't abandoned by God. Look back in Psalm 22. As he works through some of these points, he talks about the pressure he receives from the people. Verse 6, I'm a worm, no man, reproach of men, despised by the people. But let's jump down. We get some of those concepts, but there's a shift in here. In verse 16, dogs have surrounded me. The congregation of the wicked has enclosed me. Verse 19, but you, O Lord, do not be far from me. O my strength, hasten to help me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dog. Save me from the lion's mouth and from the horns of the wild oxen. You have answered me. I love verse 21 in this psalm. The psalm begins by decrying, God, I've forsaken. God, you're not listening to me. I'm praying and I'm crying, but you're not responding. But then verse 21, he says, save me. Why say save me to God if God's not listening? Well, the emotional outcry at the beginning of the psalm is overshadowed by the reality of who God is. You're not listening. You're not listening. But verse 21, you have answered me. Folks, David, running for years, he felt alone, but he wasn't. Go with me to 1 Kings. There's probably very few biblical illustrations that make this point so clearly as 1 Kings 19 does. 1 Kings 19. If this isn't one of your favorites, then shame on you. I say in love. I say in love. In 1 Kings 19, we're dealing with a situation where in 18, Elijah is on Mount Carmel and God sends the fire down, consumes the altar, and all the Baalites die. It's a great chapter. If you're a 12-year-old boy, that's something you right there, plug it in because it's pretty awesome. Chapter 19, though, follows, and you can't help but scratch your head a little bit. Chapter 18, Elijah is on a cloud. He is rocking here as all the Baalites are dying, and now God's true prophet is vindicated. God's cause is vindicated. You get to chapter 19, and you kind of go, Elijah, what happened? So, verse 4, 1 Kings 19, verse 4, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die. Wait a minute, what? He was just part of that whole cause that won in the last chapter. But you remember how that ended. Jezebel vows to kill him. And so now we have Elijah praying that he would die. Verse 4, he says, it is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I'm no better than my fathers. Down in verse 9. Goes a little further. Now in verse 9. There he went into a cave and spent the night in that place. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He said, I've been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. Verse 13. So it was when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in the mantle and went out. Stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? Same question. Same response, verse 14. I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. Don't you see the emotional reaction to the circumstances? Elijah is crying over the situation. It is terrible. And he feels alone. Pay close attention to God's response to him. This is very psalm-natured. So verse 15. The Lord said to him, go return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, anoint Hazael as king over Syria.
Also you shall anoint Jehu the son of Nimshi as king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah, you shall anoint him as a prophet in your place. It shall be that whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, Jehu will kill. Whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elisha will kill. Yet I have reserved 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. What God tells Elijah is, get up. There's more work to do. You're not alone. You're not alone in any way. There are other people who stand on your cause, but even more so is I am with you. Get up. It's interesting, as you're reading through 1 Kings, Elijah in this moment, I'm alone. But it's pretty incredible the way Kings is written. The next prophet who rebukes a king is not Elijah. It's Micaiah. Well, wait a minute. I thought Elijah was alone. No. Micaiah is working too. Micaiah is prophesying and going to a king and saying, you shouldn't have been doing that. You open up to 2 Kings. Elisha's on the scene now. Wait a minute, I thought Elijah was alone. No, he has Elisha now. And then you read through the first several chapters of 2 Kings, and there's this school of prophets, the sons of the prophets, individuals who worked for the cause of God and followed after Elijah and Elisha. He wasn't alone, but he felt alone. It's the same admonition God makes in the Psalms, guys. You might feel alone. It might be very tough. Get up. Go to work. You're not alone. God's people are right here with you. And even better, God is right here with you. Folks, we get a template for this in the Psalms. We get a template for this in the history of God's people. When we are in those moments where our hearts melt, where we're overwhelmed and we're stressed and we are lonely, and at our loneliest, we have an ever-present, compassionate God who makes promise after promise after promise in Scripture to us. So what do we do then? Well, we handle our emotions by being honest with Him and then digging in. So we continue to worship. Go back to Psalm 22. Go to the end now of this psalm, towards the very end of this psalm, to verse 22. So right after that solemn declaration, you have answered me. Verse 22, I will declare your name to my brethren. In the midst of the assembly I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise Him. All you descendants of Jacob, glorify Him and fear Him, all you offspring of Israel. For He has not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted, nor has He hidden His face from him, but when he cried to Him, He heard. My praise shall be of you in the great assembly. I will pay my vows before those who fear Him. The poor shall eat and be satisfied. Those who seek Him will praise the Lord. Let your heart live forever. Folks, not only do we confess these things to God, we come to Him in honesty and sincerity. We work through those emotions, turning to Him even fuller, even deeper, and at the same time, we continue to worship even though we're hurting. I confess that is not easy. But some of the deepest worship we can express is when we are hurting the most. We must worship through the pain, taking refuge in who He is, taking refuge in who He has always been. We take refuge in what we know, not what we feel, what we know. And we keep going back to that truth, working from that vantage point. This is why we sing the song, Farther Along, we'll know all about it. Farther along, we'll understand why. That song expresses this truth in music. That we might be hurting and we might not get all of it, but we will get it. And so we worship. Do you think about that being one of the reasons we sing? A couple of nights, last night I talked a little bit about Ephesians 5:19, Colossians 3:16, that we're singing to teach one another. But don't you appreciate, folks, that that's one of the things I'm teaching when I'm singing to you, and that's one of the things you're teaching me when you're singing to me? Is we're reminding each other, hey, it's okay to hurt, but let's look to Him. It's okay to hurt, let's look to what He's promised. Farther along, we'll understand why. We sing to remind each other that it hurts, but it's okay. It hurts. But get out and live in faith, confident in who He is and who He has promised to be always. And we can learn to be content trusting Him, looking to Him as a refuge. Psalm 22 and many other psalms written by David are written in this format. David comes to God pained, but praying, praising, pleading, and praising again. Next time you read some of David's psalms, look for that. Pained, but praying, praising, pleading, and praying again. It's powerful to consider David in that life. It's okay to hurt, folks. Let me be very clear about this. That doesn't make you a second-rate Christian. Hurting and struggling through those things, that doesn't make you a second citizen of the kingdom of heaven. You're not somehow lesser. You're not somehow defunct. In fact, for the most part, that's pretty normal. You go talk to some individuals who have been waging the good warfare for many more years than you have, and I'm gonna guess, they're gonna tell you they've had dark days too. Days where they were frustrated, days where they were discouraged, days where they had to just dig in and do it because it was right, not because it felt good in the moment. And yet, folks, that's what we see exemplified in the Psalms. Let me also be very clear about this. Not only should we do this, this can be the most profitable worship. Not just for you. Look at this with me again. We're still here in Psalm 22. Look at what he says, verse 22. I will declare your name to my brethren. In the midst of the assembly, I will praise you. And then he decries this to the whole generation of the descendants of Jacob. And then he goes on to say again in verse 25, to the great assembly, to all those who would seek Him. Verse 27, to the ends of the world and the families of the nations. Verse 29, to all the prosperous of the earth. Verse 30, to the posterity that shall serve Him. Verse 30, it will be recounted of the Lord to the next generation. They will come and declare His righteousness to a people who will be born that He has done this. Do you see what David's expressing here? This is not just about your worship to God. It's about helping others. Have you known some individuals going through some pretty horrific things who kept their faith? And when you watched them do that, you were more emboldened than they were. I'm reminded of a dear sister. Sean would know her. She actually was an elder's wife and was diagnosed with breast cancer. Beat it. A few years later, was diagnosed with ALS. When I met her, she didn't need any assistance walking. And a year and a half later, she was in one of those mechanical wheelchairs and had a little bit of use of her right arm. She never missed a service. You know how encouraging that was to see? This woman had a beautiful singing voice, and she used it every song until she couldn't sing anymore. You know how encouraging that was? This woman had the audacity to be on oxygen because she couldn't breathe on her own anymore. And as she was losing her voice, she would ease her oxygen mask down and pull me in real close because I couldn't hear. And she would ask me how I'm doing. You have names like that too. We all know Christians like that. People who will not be stopped, who will not slow down, who continue to keep their faith and maintain that courage even through all the pain, even through all the hurt, even through all of the confusion. They dig in deep and they keep worshiping a good God. Folks, not only do we have to do that for our own good, for our own faith, but we have to do that for others. This is what we need to show our kids and grandkids. Do you know how profound that was for a little 5- and 6-year-old girl to see this woman of that much faith? That makes a difference, folks. A difference that we need to make. Even when it hurts, even when we're in pain, even when we are in confused days, when our hearts have melted, we must worship our good God. And I will stress the word good God. Then this naturally would take us to one final consideration. When our hearts melt, we reflect on what God has done. Let's go back to the beginning of Psalm 22. So as he opens this out, in the emotional outcry, the pain, the tears, he returns to God, verse 3, but then notice what he says in verse 4. Our fathers trusted in you. They trusted and you delivered them. They cried to you and were delivered. They trusted in you and were not ashamed. I want you to see this. In the middle of the emotion, David has the senses, he has the capacity to recognize a fundamental truth. Listen to me very carefully. God has never failed His people. He won't start failing with you. Do you see that in verses 4 and 5? Our fathers trusted and look at that. They were delivered. Our fathers cried to you. You answered. David had that. He could remember that in all of the pain that God was still God. God was not just God. He's a good God. We can count on Him in those moments. He has always been faithful. And part of the historic plea of the Scripture is that God is faithful, and that guarantees His continued faithfulness. Do you appreciate that that's what the Scriptures are all about? This book is all about telling us God will keep His word. So when He makes these grandiose promises that, hey, I'll take you and forgive you of your sins and I'll cleanse you through Jesus Christ and I'll take you to me in heaven one day. That's a huge promise. We can trust Him to keep it though. Because He always keeps His promises. He always keeps His word. He always does what He says He'll do. Now, do not misunderstand me and take this as a blank check that saves you from all adversity. That's not the point at all. You're going to still hurt sometimes. You're going to still be in pain sometimes. In fact, I really don't see how that lines up with Scripture at all. Part of the health and wealth mentality, well, if I'm a Christian, I'll never be hurting again. Wrong. If I'm a Christian, I'll never have a zero in my bank account again unless it's behind a whole bunch of ones. Nope, that's not how that works either. You know how I know that? Because we have evidence of resilient, faithful people who suffered. The apostles were imprisoned. Stephen was stoned. James was murdered. Paul was shipwrecked. But you know what God did? Exactly what He promised He would do. He forgave them of their sins when they came to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And those who He left alive to further the gospel of Christ, He would strengthen. He did exactly what He said He will do. We need to be very careful here, brethren, that we don't write checks that God never wrote. I know it's a very easy thing to do to look at somebody who's really suffering and say it's all going to be okay. Now, if you mean by that eternally, spiritually, it will all be okay, then hey, amen to that. But when you're looking at somebody who just lost a spouse and you're telling them it's all going to be okay, if you mean physically, it may not be. You're talking about somebody that's losing a child or losing somebody they deeply love, it may not be okay. It may not be okay for a long time. But spiritually, eternally, God promised it will all be okay. What we need then is Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah mentalities. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. No matter what, I will trust you. No matter what, I will lean on you. I will trust, and I will cry, and I will hurt, but then I will trust more. And the tougher life gets, the more resilient my faith must get. One of my favorite statements in all of the Bible is found in Isaiah between chapters 42 and 46. It's repeated multiple times, and outside of that context, it's only used twice in all of Scripture. And there is no other. That statement rings through Isaiah's promises to his people, God's people, as they're going to Babylon in exile. It's going to be really bad. You're going to be really tempted. You're going to be in a lot of pain. There's going to be a lot of suffering and death. But God reiterates the point over and over and over and over again. I am Yahweh, and there is no other. There is no God besides me. There is no Savior besides me. There is no rock besides me, and there is no other. Folks, that is the anthem we still sing today. That we might face all of these things, but we have God, and there is no other. At no point do we outgrow the children's song. My God is so big, so strong, and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. We don't outgrow that. It no longer, it does not lose its validity or its truth just because our hearts are melting. Just because we're in pain. We can count on Him. Life happens to us all. And this doesn't change that. There will still be announcements on Wednesday night that dear brother so-and-so is really going through a hard time. And there will still be those announcements on Sunday that sister so-and-so just got a bad report from the doctor. Those announcements will not stop. And we struggle to go on. When you're tempted to feel sorry for yourself in those moments, I encourage you to remember, God is so good. Even when I hurt. In fact, especially when I hurt. God is so good. The Psalms, then, help remind us of these truths. That what we should do is be honest with Him. Keep our emotions in check. Continue to worship Him. And remember who He is and who He has always been. It may be that you're sitting here tonight and you have not relied on God. You've tried to blaze your own trail and have found it wanting. You have tasted the muck and the mire of this world and realized what you want is something much richer, much more satisfying. God offers that. And it may be that you are simply struggling with life, the things that happen to us all. Would you come to Him? Folks, the Psalms are God's pleading to us. Would you come? This is your opportunity, and we'd invite you to make it known now as we stand and as we sing.